look at the social media and the recent revelations of what, is going on in Facebook and Instagram and things, and the impact that has on teenagers. So when we talk about, our academy players and the pressure that they feel, because of those outside influences, it's real.
Welcome to the second edition of the City Voice podcast. I'm Peter Wood. I look after content at the club. And today this is a really special podcast. I'm joined by three very special guests. John Hackworth, welcome to the podcast again.
Thanks, Peter. It's fun to be back here.
Great to have you for a second time. Luis Swisher, our academy coach for the under-17s. Welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
No, thank you for having me here, Peter, and it's a pleasure to, help talk a little bit about mental health.
And Tim Kelly, goalkeeping coach. Fantastic to have you on. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Tim Kelly. As you said, I work with all the goalkeepers, and happy to be here.
Fantastic. So today's episode is about mental health. It's World Mental Health Day on Sunday, and we want to talk about mental health and elite sport. I know that it's a topic that you all hold dear to your heart, and we want to get a bit under the skin and give the fans a little bit of insight into how you balance mental health, high performance, and creating an elite winning culture. So before we get into that side of things, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you deal with mental health yourselves, because you're working for a new club in the area. There's a lot of pressure on it. I'd like to put the question out there, how are you individually dealing with the pressure of that yourselves? John, it'd be great if you could start.
Yeah, well, right now it's not as much pressure as it's going to be. Probably, for me to come in here and just get started, it's a bit of a honeymoon phase. So I'm sleeping better right now, to be honest. The truth is that when we, start playing games in the stadium and we ramp up the academy and our development team, it's just the nature of the business. And that pressure, depending on how things are going, it does, significantly impact you and your life at certain points. And learning to manage that is the key from my perspective.
And Luis, how do you manage the pressure? This is it's a big job. It's an exciting job. Fans are going to start recognizing you, walking about. How do you cope with this sort of?
Well, I think it goes on the lines of what John mentioned. I don't feel any pressure at all because we are on the side of the development, of our players. I think the bigger scale, the bigger scene, that's when the pressure comes, because at the moment with the academy, that's where we're trying to get ready all these players into the next level, when that pressure will come, definitely, right, for them, and hopefully they can be around. So as it is for now, I think we're trying to just be a resource for our players and help them to the process that there's no pressure. There should be, the pressure will come in the future, right?
Tim, do you have any special ways of dealing with the pressure of having the careers of young people in the palm of your keeping hands?
Yeah, I think it's for me, the pressure is just trying to get them to be the best they can be, and get them on a track where they believe in themselves and just try to meet their own potential. And it's less about the results as it is about, the end goal and the process. So for me, it's just keeping that in mind when I'm working with the players and letting them trust that process.
And Luis, you have an interesting background. As a player, you played at international level for Guatemala. Tell us a little bit about that sort of pressure. That must have been a bit different.
Yeah, for sure. That's pressure. I mean, when you're representing your country and having, in my case, 17 million at that moment, right, when I was playing, because there's always an expectation, because there's always people, especially being a sport where everything relies, where people gets like now the Cardinals, the next day everyone talks about that. The sports create that atmosphere that people with results, they feel better the next day. So I feel that's pressure, because playing at the highest level creates obviously a lot of expectation, and there's a whole country obviously behind trying to qualify for a World Cup, trying to do the different things that you have to do as a player. Now, how I did handle, obviously, that was no one teaches you that, so I feel as it goes, that's how you learn over on the flow. But I think I did it pretty good, at least the times that my best memories are as well on those moments, playing in front of 60,000, 40,000 people, and that's just what we want to do as a player, right?
John, you mentioned in your Welcome podcast last week that you always take jobs that people warn you off. So you head towards the pressure. Is that something that was always in your makeup, or is that something that as you cycle through soccer, you got addicted to in a way? Like, what's your deal with pressure?
Yeah, you probably just nailed it. I think I'm a little bit of an addict to that pressure. It's something I enjoy, and I think as an athlete, I really loved it. As a coach, it drives you, it motivates you. It can be detrimental, and I think finding the balance between, putting yourself under pressure, knowing that outside there's some pressure, and then managing it and how you deal with it. But it certainly is something that I tend to seek out, and probably my wife is probably upset at me for that, to be fair, because it has led to some interesting life changes for ourselves. But it's a reality, and it gets me up, and it keeps me very passionate about what I do.
Tim, both John and Luis have mentioned about sort of the teachable side of no one teaches you how to deal with pressure. You are a goalkeeping coach. I used to be a very bad goalkeeper. One of the things that I struggle with is the mental side of the game, because it's a lot in your head as a goalkeeper. How do you teaching the mental side of keeping must have always been part of your role. Could you give us some examples of how you teach keepers to deal with the pressure of one shot over 90 minutes that they have to save? Like, is that part of what you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. One line that we use with the goalkeepers is just, I think naturally most goalies, especially when they're younger, they're more afraid of making a mistake than excited about the opportunity, right, to make a save. And so really that's just our baseline. I think the pressures themselves come from the game, what it offers their teammates, the other team, whatnot. So if we can dumb it down a little bit, or I guess play it down a little bit, and get them to have a different perspective, and then now they're looking for the challenges of the opportunity to do something great, versus being afraid, and then obviously the resiliency. You have to keep on expressing them, and they know it themselves that their mistakes are magnified because they might only have 5, 6, 10 actions a game, some with their hands, some with their feet. So again, I think the sooner you get them just to embrace the beauty of the position is that pressure, and that's the fun part about it. And that's I think the personal challenge with every young goalkeeper, and then when they get older too. And I think that's the ones that embrace that challenge, they really excel.
Plus, you're all a little whacked out, right?
Yes, we are.
Goalkeepers.
Absolutely.
Special breed.
Special breed of people.
Absolutely.
Makes sense that you played it previously, Peter, now that I've gotten to know you a little bit.
And it would be remiss of me not to mention, and I didn't mention it in the start, but I went to Creve Coeur to watch the games at the weekend. that special moment when you win a game and everybody's going crazy on the sidelines, are those feelings that you create in those moments, are they important to the mental well-being of the players? That do you try and bottle those moments and make sure the players remember, like to anybody?
I mean, I think those are the moments that you do all the hard work. You know, you put yourself under pressure. And we mention it a lot, the process that we go through to try to prepare our players, you know, and teams to be the best they can. But when you have that success and when, you know, you have a moment like a win or you score a magical goal, and we saw several on Saturday in our games against Austin, you know, it's just such an unbelievable feeling. And you want to bottle it up and you want to, you know, keep it forever. But those are special moments because they don't happen all the time. It's certainly something we're trying to build on. It was my first time with the group, and I was so excited just to see how passionate and excited they were. You know, when they were celebrating with you, Luis, I thought it was just magical.
Yeah, I think it's part of you know, it's you release that pressure. That's the moment that you open the can, right? And it's, you know, that, you know, even those, they're kids still, but they do have some type of pressure that they put on themselves. It's just because it's natural of the game. There's emotions involved. But I think it's just that release where it has to come, because it's, you know, if you don't let it out as well, I mean, you kind of keep on that, you know, that's why the pressure goes and stays and stays. And when it comes to a goal, that's just, you know, that's the satisfying of getting out all that, you know, adrenaline that it's stuck on the can, right, basically. So
Beautiful to see both teams celebrating together, like felt very unified, sitting on the touchline of the weekend. Tim, I was watching you at the weekend. You've got a close bond with your players, like the 1v1 coaching that goes on in the sideline. Is that part of a sort of tailored program that you have with keepers, like, or is that just, you know, part of how you operate as a coach?
Yeah, no, I think it's just part of how I operate as a coach. I think when I first started coaching, I was probably a good trainer my first 4 or 5 years, and then I became a good coach after that. And what I mean by that is I realized is, you know, probably with any player, but specifically with the goalkeepers, I have an opportunity to work on the individual a lot. And that's what I try to do. And I would say it's probably just as much how they develop as a person and how they're able to handle things. It is just as much as being a goalkeeper. So I know you mentioned about the halftime with one of our goalkeepers, right? And I think part of that is you start organically having more trust with each other. And then you also know kind of how a goalie likes to interact. And for me, that the halftime, right, I don't mind talking about it, is Mason is a resilient kid, and he's a tough kid. And I think for him, you know, that moment was pretty unique in the fact that it's driven to keep him into the game through intensity. And to his credit, what we were talking about at that halftime was a mistake by him, but to his credit, his voice never changed, and he was resilient in the moment. And to be fair to him, he actually ended up having a decent game after that. And so what you saw is sometimes is played up a little bit strategically to help the player get through it. And yeah, that's a fun part of my job is work on the individual for sure.
Mesa made a huge save in the second half, I thought.
Yeah, he did, and that's the thing. And players, the field players have it too. The thing is with field players is something happens again within 20 seconds, within 30 seconds. You know, so they have to be switched on constantly. Where goalies, they can just all of a sudden have a mistake and sit there for 10 minutes and thinking about that mistake, and that's the challenge. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Moving on to like where things stand in the game right now on the mental health front, professional soccer has never been faster, more tactically intense, and players have never been under the microscope as much as they are right now for all sorts of reasons. how do you all feel that the game has changed over the last, even 5 years when it comes to, mental pressures that maybe weren't there before? John?
Well, look, I think this is something that as a society we're dealing with. You look at the social media and the recent revelations of what, is going on in Facebook and Instagram and things, and the impact that has on teenagers. So when we talk about, our academy players and the pressure that they feel, because of those outside influences, it's real. And I mean, I reflect back to being a teenager myself and having worked with, youth players for a long time. I mean, it's an incredibly difficult age when you're developing and trying to find yourself, and whether you're playing or not, there's so many things that are going on. I think we just need to be super mindful of that process and take care of them, protect them as best we can from all of those pressures that they're feeling. And that as a club, we need to do that, with professionals who, I think all of us have to be a little bit of sports psychologists as a coach. You have to know your players really well. You have to have a really good relationship. But then, there's experts too. We're at the club now, we're talking about a mental conditioning coach and a sports psychologist to make sure that if there are issues out there, that we're going to deal with them, both, ourselves on the field, but with experts as well.
Mental conditioning coach will sound like something very modern to fans that are getting to know the club. Like, is that a role that was there 10, 15 years ago?
It depends on the club. It depends on the situation. I know that I first started and came across a mental conditioning coach probably in the early 2000s, and it was one of the best things I did for my team. It meant that I could still be the coach and still try to figure out the pressures that all the players are feeling. But if, somebody needed it, there was a specific specialized person there to deal with it. And it does make a huge difference. And I think in the modern game, you look around the world and certainly in our country, and most clubs, have those kind of people around.
Luis, how has the game changed since you were a player? And are there things that you see young players doing that you weren't, or you're glad that weren't there before? Pressures that they're dealing with that maybe you didn't expect to be dealing with in 2021.
Yeah, I think it is the social media, everything. I mean, I remember still playing social media starting going on in 2004, 5. I think Facebook was the first thing, I guess, or I think it was MySpace or something like that.
Wow,
but
you
still,
just dated yourself big time.
it still was new. I mean, and it was still everyone was discovering that part from that side of the social media. So yeah, I've been like kind of in not having it, transition to start having it, and then now experience it by having it, but with the players, right? I think it's like John said, is a huge piece of in the puzzle what we look in now, and how players are developing and how they're growing within all these things, external things that it becomes, if you see in the age characteristics of the players, in the 15s is even different than probably what a 17 accepts the social media. It's even different. My kid is 10 years old, and he's starting to, I want to have this, I want to have that. When is the conversations, when is the correct moment to start introducing him into this world of the social media? But it's something that it is happening at 10 years old. Like if you see kids that they want to do that now because maybe their buddies at school, they're doing it. So I think it is changing a lot for sure. The thing for me, it is how do you handle it? How do you manage it? How do you learn to deal with those external factors? Because at the end, it could cost something on the players that might take a different direction because of the pressure of the social media. They want to look good. At my time, I think it was everything at school. Everything was about the school. And it was not through. Now it is through a phone. It's through a school that goes through, that connects to you want to be good, looking good all the time. Because now it is, in my time, there was no influencers. Now there's influencers all over the place. And what is that? Like, it's people that is using different tools. So players at this point they're also, developing in a different way. So it's interesting how it's going, and I, like I said, like John mentioned, it's about educating ourselves, about educating other guys as well, and educating with the correct people that knows and understands about this subject.
Tim, do you take into account the pressures of social media, and are you preparing the players for what's to come there, or like does it consider in your thinking at the moment?
You know, I think social media can be good, obviously, and bad. The one positive for, at least in my world, for the goalkeepers is the clips that you see rampant on social media, the good and the bad. And majority of the time they see whoever their idol is always doing good things. Reality is, through his process, he probably had many mistakes along the way. So, but with the content that's out there, I mean, I think there's a bit of humility seeing that someone that they look up to make a mistake, ball go through their hands. So you can use it, and I do use it for good examples and examples of hey, people are human, and it doesn't matter what level you're at, what age you're at, you're going to make mistakes. So I try to use it to my advantage as far as talking about it. I think I was on the bus a couple weeks ago with the kids traveling, I think back from Indianapolis or something, and they gave a breakdown of like what each platform is, and I'd never thought about that. They all have like, Facebook is for old people, Instagram is for like fun and like Facebook,
Cuts
for
deep.
us. But they're kind of categorizing what each platform kind of is and what they use it for. And I don't know, it gave me a kind of it was refreshing, because I felt like what they were saying was exactly what I see as an adult. You know what I mean? As far as like just the negative stuff of it, like they see that. And so now the process for them is deciphering what they're going to believe in and what they really care about. And I think most 15 to 17-year-olds care about the funny shots or the trick shots with the cap, and the bottle cap and all that. And so, use it to our advantage.
Right. Julian Nagelsmann famously said 30% of coaching is tactics, 70% is social competence. Could you tell the fans you're all extremely social people. I mean, for the fans watching, like, I think the collection of coaches that we have at this club, like, everybody interacts really well. You can feel that you all get along. What does social competence mean when it comes to coaching in 2021?
I mean, from my perspective, it means relationships, and especially as it pertains to the mental health of your players, it means that as a coach, hopefully we have a relationship with individuals where we can identify when they're really struggling and when they need help and when they need, an arm around them, and just that encouragement. I do think it's something that we have to be mindful of all the time now. And to your point, whether it's being on a bus ride home or just the way they come out to training, or when they have a bad moment after the end of a game, how do they leave the field? Is it, an encouraging word, or is it just us paying attention to them enough so that they know somebody cares?
Luis, I've been to training sessions and seen you spending time with players after, like, extensive amounts of time. How important is social competence to you as a coach?
Yeah, I think it goes in the same lines. Everything that you do without the tactics is about the relationships, is about the management, the way that you interact with them, the way that you're gonna help them and guide them through the process of the time that they're with us. And I think it is important to build that rapport, right, and build that relationship as well. And then I think to TK's point is to make them feel important. I mean, with TK is a group of 6, but it's for us. I mean, you have 11 plus the 7 plus 8, so it's a 28 world of players. Even though they go with him, they will come with me. There's a lot of conversations, there are a lot of things, and the most important part for me it is make them feel important. I mean, that because there's always going to be ranking, there's going to be always who's doing better than other ones. But even those guys that are not doing better, even those guys they need to feel that they're important, because that when it can come the part of not feeling accepted, and because they're competing, and it's a world where we're competing, and that's a part where you need to find that balance as well to make them feel special, I guess.
Tim, the competition aspect is important. Obviously, like this is an elite level club. How do you balance the emotional side of the game? Because sometimes tough conversations need to be had. Like, what's your process of knowing how hard to push or pull?
I think over time, you start knowing your players, and obviously the players know the coach as well. I think it's no different than a leader on a team, or whether if it's a captain or a goalkeeper. It's just knowing the personalities of the players that you're working with, or the players that you play with, and then that helps you kind of guide how your messages are to them and what your conversations are like. And I think one of the biggest things for at least the goalie world is, we try to really stress that, let's be honest, some of the biggest positive or negative influences are their peers. It's not necessarily the coaches. More so sometimes in the game. So if I can get all the goalkeepers specifically, and I'm sure they do it with the teams as well, in a team environment, but I try to push the peer envelope as much as I can, because I think if they get them to support each other, it goes a long way. And then on top of that, coaches have to make decisions on who plays. And so it takes away that element of, say, Luis and I are competing against each other, and John is our coach. He's got to decide between one or the other. It's not his fault. It's not my fault. It's his fault. But the point is, this relationship is very, very important.
Right.
Because they're all going through the same ups and downs. They all give up good goals, bad goals, or make great saves, or give up a bad goal. So, I really dive into them getting along themselves, and encouraging each other, and it works really well.
John, just to finish out this section, you've been in the game a very long time. You've seen some spectacular rises of careers. Well, that English sounded good there. But you've seen some spectacular careers take off, and you've seen some players not take off. Is there a consistent thread of mental preparedness that you see in players that go right to the top? Like, are there patterns that you look for?
Sure, and this is probably a much bigger topic, but in a nutshell, I think it comes down to core values and character. And as coaches, when we can instill some of those core values, and probably the biggest one, well, two that I can think of, humility and confidence. When you're a young player and you are now being exposed to, all the things in life that are really tough decisions, if you have good core values, you tend to make better decisions. And with young players who are in these kind of situations, whether it's me talking to the parents or me talking to the individual, I always try to emphasize the fact that there's a reason you got here. We talk about a process a lot. There's a process that allowed you to reach this level. Stay true to that. It's a fundamental basis that it's going to serve you well the rest of your career. Don't let that get away. And always, again, be confident in yourself, but also humble to the fact that this is a really special opportunity for you every single day. And at some point, it goes away.
So now we want to move on to, I feel like we've covered a lot of coaching, but there's a specific section where we tackle coaching. Mental health and sport tends to conjure up images of players at low ebbs, or players dealing with injuries. Is there more to it than that? Watching the players at the weekend, everybody was on fire, confidence looked like it was going through the roof. Do you have to manage both the downs quite clearly, but is there an element of managing when confidence is at a high, keeping those streaks going, or like how do you balance the lows and the highs? And is there do you have tactics that you do for that?
I'll just throw out one big is humility. I mean, to echo John is if they're having a lot of highs, all right, and they're winning, it's to stay humble and keep on working. And for me, that's a big part of it. Obviously, in a team, in a team environment, I'll let the two masters talk about that for sure.
Yeah, look, when you're trying to not let, especially young players, believe and get too confident, because there's a fine line. There's always a balance. And that's really what, we're talking about when we're talking about them and their mental health, is can they keep all of these very confusing things that are flying at them, whether it's social media, whether it's a coach telling them they're doing great or doing poorly, can they keep it in a context? And that's where I always come back to trying to be consistent with those core values that you want your players to be taught. You want them to exercise every single day. You want to train them in a way that it doesn't matter whether it's high or whether it's low or whether it's in between, that there is a lot of consistency to those values that we expect them to operate on every day.
Luis?
Well, I said at the end is we have seen it so far, especially I'm going to talk about the 70s, right? A lot of social media, first experience with everything with CD, with, being in video. These kids that had never been in front of a mic, never been in front of a camera, never been in front of that high expectation. They were, like I said, they put it on a bucket, and now they're experiencing all this. So the emotions for me are super high, are all over the place. So it's our job is to maintain that balance, and then it's if it goes on the games, is maintaining the purpose. So what is the purpose? The purpose is a win, and yes. But is it on the long term that we've been talking about the process, is make them feel what it is important as well from this process. That's from the coaching side. And then from the other side is trying to make them as well understand that they're on a learning phase of all this social media, all this, even for us. I mean, want to be fair. It's since I was a player, I haven't been in so many interviews and so many things that imagine for a 16, 15-year-old, even some guys are 14, I guess, 14 years old. It's overwhelmed. So we're trying to manage within our, obviously with our sessions, with everything, trying to make them feel that, look, this is what you're going to get. This is the expectations that you are. But also we need to understand that everything is new for them. And it's, for me, it is all about emotions. It's all about emotions. Imagine you've never been in front of a camera, and we're talking about all these social media. They want to look good. They want to be in it becomes like TK said, it becomes, if there's not a good relationship, then it's about, I want to be, why I'm not being selected, why I'm not, even for those little details of being in front of social media, it is huge for them, because it's all about how they look. That at these ages that we dealing with is all about how they look, and that's where we need to be super careful how we, obviously funnel them in terms of that there's going to be more out there, and how do we help them, guide them through the process of you need to focus on what you're here for, which is soccer, which is your development, which is get better, not looking better, right? So, and over time we'll see if how it goes.
You mentioned earlier that no one taught you the mental side of the game. Is that correct, or did you get a bit of coaching advice when you were younger that you were like, that was the best piece of advice I ever had for managing myself?
I don't think as a player, probably when I was young, I never had any piece of advice. I mean, it was just, especially from the background where I come from and the way that we learn, soccer, and how do we develop in our, it's more about the street soccer. It's about, I went in through a system of academy when I was 14 years old. Everything before it was just, friends that's the word. It happens now as well, but never on a structure, let's call it that way. And then even when I went through the system of more structure, it wasn't great. So I think the best pieces of advice, I got it when I was already in my prime of with coaches that they were better in managing all this. And I think the best piece of advice is and I don't think I got it as a player. I got it as a coach to deal and how to learn how to deal with your emotions, because and then the next thing, the most important from transitioning from a player to a coach, for me, it is you're not a player anymore. You need to think differently. So the emotions that you have as a player, they're totally different than you have it as a coach. So dealing and separating that, it is I would say the most challenge. That's when I thought, in my early years of coaching, oh shoot, I'm doing this wrong because I'm still thinking emotionally as a player. And so that's the biggest advice is about to control my emotions and knowing how to deal with them. And I think you have better responses to any circumstance or any, I would say, any decision making or anything that you have in your life.
And for the fans listening to this podcast, there's a video going out. It's called Pitch Pass, and it's Luis living his values when the craziness is going on all around you. You grounded the players and said a lot to improve on, but like celebrate the moment. So I thought that's a good example of your coaching in action. John, what is your general philosophy when it comes to managing players at an individual level? Like, what are you when you mentor the coaches that are in your team now? Is there like a guiding philosophy or a north star for like how you manage players at an individual level?
Well, it's simple. One is get to know them, build the trust, build the relationship, so that you again are focused on them and slight changes that you might see in them. Because when we're talking about mental health, or it might not be mental health, it just might be mental preparedness in going into a game. Can you recognize when there's a difference? All players go through times when they don't feel confident about their performance. All players, in life, things are thrown at them. And sometimes as coaches, we have no idea what they're going through. I remember coaching a professional player, senior player, and he was going through a really tough personal problem. And I didn't know about it, but I could tell there was something going on with him that wasn't right. And just having a conversation, hey, what's going on with you? I don't know, but it appears to me that there is something different about you. And then that player being able to, communicate that problem, get it off his chest, and then, being able to go seek, professional counseling on it, it made a huge difference in this particular case. It's, I'm giving you a round answer, but, knowing the player and knowing what they're like and being able to be hyper aware of what is happening in their life sometimes is really important.
Brilliant. Tim, you've been a coach for a long time in a very specialized position. How do you go about training mental robustness? Like, is that part of training, or is it like more in the relationship? Like, do you evolve the way that you coach players?
What does robust mean?
Ability to I think to give more specifics to that, dealing with the ups and downs of being a goalkeeper, is that something that you can train, or does that only come from experience and sort of being on the battlefield?
I mean, I think that the game experiences shows you your resiliency, humbles you, motivates you. I think the game itself provides a lot of those emotions that the players either consciously or subconsciously have to deal with along their path, and so I think a large part of it is the game itself teaching them, because they're maturing differently as well as they're getting older. They're more cognitive of certain situations. 11-year-old who gives up 7 goals, they'll probably think all 7 goals are their fault. Or maybe an 18-year-old can decipher and say, okay, well, I gave up 7 goals today. 3 or 4 are my fault. 3, you know what I mean? That not 3, my center back could have helped me there, or vice versa. And I think I think the other part too is I hone in constantly about the human. I think John brings it up, and the more they realize that it's just you're more than just a position or a title of a goalkeeper, the easier it is for them to accept mistakes that might come along their way. And I wanted to go back to your last question because just the other day, we have a rule within the goalies that if they're having a bad day, they actually can come up and say, "I'm having a bad day," and then I know they can talk about it if they want to talk about it. But I also know that if it's a bad day, for whatever reason, then I'm aware of it. And how we go through practice. And a quick example is one of our goalies right now, grandfather's not doing well, and he came up to me and he told me that at the beginning of practice, and then the group got together and that said a few thoughts, and thinking of that player and that grandfather. And I think the more they're human, the more they can start separating the things that go along with the game. And because they're going to be human beings way longer than they're going to be soccer players. So as soon as we can get them to tackle or understand that, then I think the process starts.
I think the one of the hopes of this podcast was that there would be tidbits that came through from how you operate as coaches that people could take into their daily lives. And I'm having a bad day, as a rule, is something that every office should have in America. So it's great that you've got things that people can take into their daily lives. Final question in this section. We've got an extremely passionate base of fans everywhere you go in St. Louis. If you're wearing a mask with the club crest, people want to talk to you about it. Turning up to an under-17 and under-16 game at the weekend, and there must have been 100 people in and around that are just fans that want to support the team. Knowing that the vision of the club is going to be focused around bringing young players through, and all of you knowing the pressures that go with that, how much do you think the positivity of fans in our future stadium is going to be to the development of these young players when they, some of them hopefully hit the MLS in 2023?
It's a really interesting topic to talk about because I think, I've only been in St. Louis a short amount of time, but what I know historically is that this is a soccer town. And you talk about passion, you have a really educated group of fans, though. And I think that's going to make and put a little bit more pressure on these young players. But, if they know that there are people there to support them, going back to what Tim just said, having a group around us that supports us through the good, the bad, and the indifferent. I think, especially when we're talking about mental health, nobody grows and develops better than when you have a setback, you have a bad game. And as coaches, we're always trying to utilize those most important moments where you're learning the most valuable lessons. And oftentimes those aren't the wins. Those are the losses. Those are the mistakes. And in the big picture, if we have a community that is supportive of our young players, knowing what we're trying to do to bring these guys through, I think that's going to be really important to our overall growth as a club and those individuals.
Luis, as an ex-player that's played in front of 40,000, 60,000 people, how important can the St. Louis City fan base be to the development of these young players?
I would say, there's a trust and loyalty of the fans. It doesn't matter what level they have shown, even with our 16, 17-year-olds, and being there and supporting them, regardless of what is happening. That tells how it's going to look for the future. And I think, like I said at the beginning, the players are learning through these moments, having fans around there, knowing how it's going to be in the future looking for them. So the ones that make it, I think is going to be an easier, smooth way of adapting to that environment than obviously that the way that they're doing it now than everyone else because of how the fans are being so far in San Luis.
Tim, you smiled when I mentioned the fans and the passion that everybody has in this city for what you're building. How important do you think the fan base is going to be for the success of this club?
It's huge. I think, to go back to John's point, I think historically we've been known to have players come out of this city, and I think that motivates our younger players. And the more that they understand that there's a bar there, and there's a standard that they're trying to get to, that drives that. And then the fans alone, the good thing so far, and I hope the fans continue to do this, is when I do get on social media and I do look at comments and stuff, for the most part, it's pretty good so far. I think when we've lost, there hasn't been any comments, so that's great. Keep that up. But when we lose or when we win, there's a lot of positive and and that's just huge because these kids do look at that. And maybe that, when the other levels get here, it might fall off a little bit. The attention might fall off a little bit. But, I think the world and this country and this city is driven off social media. And sometimes the only attachment that both have could be through social media. And so it's absolutely massive. And to see those people out at the games and the excitement. Some of these kids they might play in front of their friends and family, probably more family, because their friends probably play other sports too that they already have games. And so to see 150, I think that first game there must have been 600, 700, 500 people there. Those are things that motivate kids. We can only say so much. Right, but those little things like that are huge for those players, what I call igniters, man, they're priceless. So keep it up.
So in conclusion, fans help. They can help the process.
100%.
Fantastic. So last question for the group. I know that a lot of people that are going to be listening to this are athletes in some way, shape or form, or they have kids that are athletes that are looking to better themselves. Do you have a bit of advice, either from a parent's perspective, from an athlete's perspective? Like, what's one technique that you could give athletes to sharpen up their mental game and to keep on track? John, I want to start with you.
One. I can just pick one.
If you meander into two, that's
All
extra.
right.
That's bonus value.
Look, there was a word that was thrown out here earlier in the podcast, resilient. And I think you have to be resilient. As a player, it's so important that you can bounce back from difficult moments, that you can bounce back from having experiences that are challenging. And I think that goes back to having a core belief in yourself and having a support system around you, whether it's coaches, whether it's a club, whether it's a sports psychologist or our mental conditioning coach. I know that we're going to try to provide all of our players with enough support so that they can be resilient. They can come back. And when you come back and are really resilient, you come back better. And that's, I think, what we're going to try to do as a club. And I hope all the parents and all the athletes out there listening that you can learn how to be resilient, because if you can do that, you'll be better for it.
Fantastic. Luis, what's your one bit of advice?
I think for me it is the what I said at the beginning about the emotions, right? And mental health reflects how do you emotional and psychological well-being you are, how do you interact, how do you do. So I think trying to maintain that balance in how to deal with emotions, I think it is a huge piece for athletes, even for parents. In our environment, it is about that, right? Because it's even a parent wants the best for their kids. So it's about dealing all the time with those emotions. So I would say that's the biggest part for me, how to manage and how to learn and how to deal. There's not a secret voice for that, but or magic to do, but it's just how we individually, from the individual, how to, look for help. If we cannot do that, listen to other people that knows how to do that, and that's just my takeaway from that.
Peter, can I jump in 1 second? 'Cause
yes.
You said I could maybe say two.
You can.
For the parents, and I know they've heard this before, but please just be a parent and love and support your young athletes. They're going through a lot that's highlighted on this podcast. There is nothing more important to a child than to have the love and caring and safe environment away from the pressures of the field and competition, whether it's social media or not. So I know probably parents hear that to nauseam, but yet every single time I step out on a youth field, I see craziness happening. And it's a concern for all of us because, we get only a little part of their time, and then the family environment is huge. So it's really, it's so important that parents understand how vitally important their support is in terms of their child's mental health.
That's a great point. And Tim, to close out with you.
Yeah, so for the players, it would be humility and resiliency. I think those two are very good to have as you're going through your journey. And then my other part was for parents, and it's really just, everyone's relationship with their kids are different. But I would just implore, kind of like what I do with the goalies, is just read the situation. If the kid had a bad day in the game and they don't want to talk in the car, just turn on music. If they're having a great day and they want to talk about it, talk about it. But let them kind of steer what their emotions are after a game or after a practice, because the one thing that maybe parents don't realize is that they're already getting either pressure from their environment or from their peers that they may not even know about. And so that's my biggest advice to parents, is just read the situation, read your child. You know them better than any of us, and kind of let them guide what that process is for them, not the parent guiding it for them.
Fantastic. 4 pieces of great advice to take through. So that concludes our second The City Voice podcast. John, Luis, Tim, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you. I know that this is can be a difficult topic, but the way that you've delivered your message today, it shows the care that goes into the club, and I'm sure everybody watching this is going to be thankful because there's a lot of information that you're sharing and a lot of great advice off the back of it. So for anybody listening to this, if you've got any feedback, we'd love to hear it, because we'd like to do more of these moving forward. And on that note, thank you for joining. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you,
Peter.
Go City.